Hi friends, host Eric here, talking with famous people. And before I begin this video on distinction, instantiation, and existence, precursors to cognitive functions, let me just say I'm here in peer.in/TwFP2 right now. I often am here. At the moment, there's nobody else here. Usually there's somebody else here, but if you come to this room, I am always excited to hear and answer questions that anybody has. I like to talk, so if anybody has questions, I love to answer them. Or if you want to challenge something I've said or whatever, I'm here. Anybody's welcome to come talk to me. And without further ado, let me go on to this. It'll be in the store, twfpcollectibles.com. Distinction, instantiation, and existence. This video explains, I think, what we need to understand before we start talking about cognitive functions. It's implicit in our conversation about cognitive functions and a necessary prerequisite to it. Number one, the naming of a thing observes its distinction from other things. Number two, every instance begins with an observer making an observation. An instance refers to the set of meanings and experience that comprise the observation and define it by that which it is not. For something to be something, it has to not be something else. Instantiation correlates the strength of one with observation, both directions, and with existence, both directions, which means something cannot be an instance without being observed and existent, and vice versa. Nothing unobserved exists. To call a thing unobserved is to make none of the distinctions needed to call a thing a thing. An unobserved object is a variable with no set definition. But when assigned any value at all, it becomes observed. Even the value unobserved renders something, perhaps a rotating question mark floating in space. Non-physical objects are those that operate in their own time-space, such as a story or a song or a word, called time objects. To highlight their equivalency in terms of stasis or objectiveness, regardless of the presence or absence of corporeal form being physical form. A time object has distinction, like a space object that's mixed as an object, but it is comprised of meaning or definition rather than matter, or other things it might be comprised of, like, appearance. Space objects are defined by such measures as length, height, weight, color, etc. Space objects are subject to unidirectional time, aka causality. That is to say, if I break a rock, I can't say undo and I have it unbreak, right? But I can in this conversation. I can. Let's pretend I break a rock. Okay, now pretend I didn't break the rock. Well, fine. I was backwards and forwards. It makes no difference. Hi there. I'm in the middle of a video. Time objects are defined by such measures as, I'm going to share my, I can't really share my screen right now. That won't work. Anyway, sorry. Time objects are defined by such measures as duration, melody, definition, title, author, definition, etc. Time objects are not subject to causality, but instead are subject to conditionality, as is demonstrated with the broken rock. Okay, subjects, objects, criteria, and decisions. Socionics and Jung refer to introverted functions as subjective and extroverted functions as objective. This is simply wrong and survives no scrutiny. The distinction implicit regarding the physicality of objects cognated about is meaningless. Extroverted feeling and extroverted thinking are not limited in attention to physical objects. Yes, they use data from the outside world and concern themselves with impacts in the world, but so do introverted feeling and introverted thinking. All four judgment functions occur within and are manifestations of the subject. What else could any aspect of an individual's cognition be, possibly, but wholly comprised of and entirely contained within the self? Well, then how can anything be objective at all, then, Eric? Well, only subjects observe. That which does not observe is an object. To observe, the infinitive's meaning, subtextual implications, spelling, pronunciation, rhymes, common usages, and other communicable attributes of the object comprise the verb's identity. Meaningful usage of the verb instantiates an observation because it requires that something, an object of some sort, be there to get observed. Thus, when we talk about the objective, we refer to a rhetorical conceit. We refer to the practice of removing from consideration all distinctions unique to any given subject. In other words, subjective considerations like mood, character of the speaker, or previous positions stated by the same speaker. In fact, we have named fallacies like ad hominem and fallacy of inconsistency, which state neither a person's character nor past positions are relevant in the evaluation of his current claims, neither respectively is in the wrong place there. Which state respectively that a person's which state respectively a person's character and past positions that a person's character and past positions are not relevant in the evaluation of his current claims. Hi, John. I'm making a little video here. Sorry, I can't share the screen without messing it up. This practice of removing personal considerations from the evaluation of claims in dispute provides the distinction between the objective and the subjective as the terms are used in common parlance. The suffix "iv" means things that are within the definitional scope of the root. Thus, objective means things within the definitional scope of objects. The definitional scope of objects is constrained only by eliminating that which is a subject. And given the distinction between subjects and objects is the capacity to observe, then to be objective is to remove from consideration that which observes, namely stuff that is unique to the individual person. Okay. So let's move on now to priorities and paying attention. Event A. Got a light, says the man with a cigarette and no lighter to the man smoking. Wordlessly, the smoking man hands a lighter and gets it back, and the interaction is over. It happened, but does it mean anything? Though the guy who wanted a light got one, the event meant little to either man, probably. After all, it's a short interaction of simple utility, and nothing surprising happens. However, let's say the smoking man thinks a lot about the event anyways, linking it to his ongoing philosophizing and ideating about how and when such a commonplace happening attains importance. Well, significance manifests in its link to identity. Importance needs a preposition, to or for. To say that an event or object is important is to link it to the interests of agent or agents. For example, a diving catch to escape a base-loaded gem in the 8th inning is important to most people only insofar as it is made by a player on a winning team in a close game. If the score is 15-0, 0 either way, the catch is unimportant unless it's so visually spectacular a catch to watch that it gains significance beyond the results of the game. Either way, the importance manifests in the link to the active valuing by subjects. So, when my own perspectives conflict, which do I prioritize? This is the fundamental question of cognitive functions. Everyone has to have at least one dominant metaphysics, and really at least several. For easy definition, let's call a metaphysics a criterion that indicates which value or values ought to be preferred when they come into conflict with other values in a given context. It's not a criterion that you actually actively reference. It's reflexive, like reaching for a door handle with your right hand rather than your left. And this handedness analogy is a good one and more significant and universal than one might initially think. Because we have the capacity to understand objects through an objective frame and habitually do so understand them, we sometimes forget that to do so is itself representative of the ongoing manifestation of our own cognitive habits. Thus, this text manifests host Eric's cognitive self into objects, and it does so in a fashion that expects readers to determine the legitimacy of these objects as a matter unconnected to the fact that it was host Eric, instead of Joe Smith, whose identity these words approximate. It disavows the relevancy of that subjective foundation because host Eric cognates by objective metrics, habitually, and thus prefers the certainty of that which is approximate, but generalizes over that which is precise but unique. That was really well said, Eric. Thanks. Words and reality. Most people understand themselves as an object and force vector inhabiting a single reality with other such objects and force vectors. I represent the real-time fluid interactions of agents and objects within the field of that single reality in sentences. This section here attempts to represent the real-time fluid process of the representing of the real-time fluid process of interactions and agents and etc. that comprises being. So it gets pretty meta pretty fast, right? You get very far away from the machine code very quickly. Words versus reality. The distinctions I make represent attending, which is to say manifesting itself through one of a finite set of possible observational modalities that know/be/create the self fluidly through time and space. I might claim to know the following things. Number one, if I bang my knee into the corner of that table, I'm going to hurt physically. Number 2, if I am at Maureen's house tonight, I won't also be at Sue's house at the same time. But what do these things have to do with reality? No one walks around thinking, remember, self, hard objects can cause pain if I bang my knee into them. And no one sometimes forgets that they can't be two places at once. So what meaning do these sentences have? Well, words constrain people. Ultimately, conditional rules like 1 and 2 above provide an almost always unstated foundation for managing relationships. In other words, you can't claim to not know that hitting me will hurt me because of number 1. And because of number 2, you can't claim that you didn't know that when you agreed to go out with Steve the same night you had plans with me, that you didn't realize you couldn't be at two places at once. Those things are matters of sufficient consensus as to be considered axiomatic. There exist no words without a subjective link. We can only understand things in an abstract sense by reducing the reality we experience to a static representation of the irreducibly complex fluid systems in which we operate. They're not irreducibly complex, though, because we do reduce them all the time, but they are approximate reductions. They're imperfect. Our approximations are always imperfect because our approximations are always static, whereas reality is always fluid. We reduce that the other person we spend so much time with to Kimberly, or wife, or son, or whatever, and understand that symbol of the static object on the various fields we construct as metaphysical frames of reference. We might mechanically generate random mixes of words into grammatical sentences, but the meaning of such is still limited to the meanings understood within individual subjects and to the extent conveyance of actual ideation occurs. It does so either within the subject reading the words or later when discussing the meanings with another. All right, so I hope this is helpful in understanding that whenever we're talking about cognitive functions, we're using words, namely objects, that we treat as detached from the subject and having meaning outside of the subject in order that we be able to communicate through things that generalize rather than things that are unique to the particular experience of an individual. Things that are truly unique to the experience of an individual and are experiential in nature cannot be communicated through word objects because word objects are static and precise insofar as they establish distinctions and exclude certain things definitively and definitionally from their scope. And thus it is that I have completed this video on observation, agency, and existence. Did I not read the first page? I didn't read the first page, huh? Should have started with the first page, I bet. Would have been better. Observation, object, and agency. To observe is to establish a distinction. Object versus field is one basic distinction that might be observed. A subject is that which observes. An object is that which is observed by a subject. All subjects are also objects. Some objects are never subjects. Statements are examples of observations but do not themselves observe. So they're objects but never subjects. 5. Moral agents are those subjects capable of self-observation. Self-observation is to instantiate one's ontological distinctions as objects. B. All cognitively undamaged humans become moral agents when they acquire language. 6. Amoral agents are those observers incapable of objective self-observation. A. Plants and most animals cannot create and refine symbolic representations of themselves as far as we know. Number 7. Non-living agents are those that cannot observe. 8. All objective observations are communicable. To communicate an observation, the experience must be first rendered into an object. B. A static object, a statement, for example, indicates an approximation of a real-time experience. C. The other will never have that experience, but he can know its impact upon other observations, provided that he understands the words similarly and grasps the interactive nature of statements, observers, in the interests of moral agents. So this is basically just explaining why words are what they are and how we have to understand the limits of words before we begin talking. And we have to understand the rules of words and the rules of introverted thinking that say, all right, we're agreeing to constrain the scope of this approximation for the purposes of this dispute. That doesn't mean everything collapses into semantics, all right? So I hate it when people do that shit. Let's just collapse everything into semantics. No, fuckface. So yeah. Thanks for watching.